some of the stuff that they're gonna show you is pertinent to what's referred to as TCCC, so Tactical Combat Casualty Care. And TCCC it's been kind of mainstream for quite some time, like 10 plus years. And once upon a time, it used to be referred to as like an advanced level of medical care, so understanding, application, and knowledge essentially. But now they realize there's such benefit to it that it's being spread through the Canadian Forces, so everybody's getting a taste of it, which is great. Now, like, I've got a bag full of stuff that we'll go through in medical supplies. Some of this will be limited to what you have accessibility to, but all of this stuff is available open source. You can buy this stuff with multiple different companies that provide them. And one really good one that's in Canada is called CTOMS. CTOMS is a really good organization. I think it's in Alberta. It might be in Manitoba. Don't quote me. I think I'm pretty sure it's Alberta. But anyway, when it comes to medical supplies per se, you can literally go through their website, click, put in a shopping cart, and then you got it within days. So it's all the stuff that I'm going to show you can get it. It's available. So my rig, the way that I set the rig up is essentially two purposes. So up front, tourniquet, so I can use with one hand or the other. So if one hand is not functioning, then I can still operate with the other hand. Sometimes, you'll see different guys set it up differently, but the idea is you're able to access it wherever you put on your kit with one hand or the other, no matter if you're in a vehicle, the open, in an urban setting, etc. So the way I set mine up is with these little rubber bands, and over time you'll have to replace these because they dry out and they break, but that's just essentially to keep it where I know it's always going to be, but I can rip it off easy if I need it under stress. And then the way I set it up, this is really important, and it takes some time to get it so it's functional, but not going to get in your way or hinder you from accessing your magazines or doing your job essentially. But the way you can set it up is with one hand application. So the emphasis or the motivation would be, if I needed to apply this to myself, I want to be able to do it with one hand. So we'll feed it through just one of the loops rather than both. So if you have the ability, time, opportunity, or you're helping out a buddy, then that's when you would feed it through the second loop to give it that more secure, tight set. But when it's for your own personal use, the way I set it up,
so you can just rip and stick.
That's right. And then when you set it up, what I tend to do is I'll overlap it, subtle, but I overlap it just a little bit right here. So now I've got a bit of a purchase.
That's smart.
Right? So I can rip that off when I'm under a little bit of stress or not functioning, my fine motor skills are not functioning properly. I want to be able to grasp that so I can get it on. And then because the Velcro, it's it can be a bit cumbersome if you don't set it up properly. Essentially what you do is using the back of the tourniquet as well, or itself, I'm going to fold it over on itself, and then allowing the majority of this smooth surface that doesn't have the Velcro female end, if you will, to fold it over like that. And then with this in place, you stick it onto the rig, and then when you access it, you can literally grab it with one hand, open it up, without the Velcro giving you a hard time. That way, with one hand, you can place it in, say for example, with a gunshot wound to the leg or massive bleed to the leg. If this hand was not functioning, you can get it into place, and with one hand, get it to position where you can get it effectively in place, but with one hand, secure it. Alright, so say my left hand is the one that's not working, I want to be able to do this with both hands, so you'll practice both legs, arm, try it from different various positions. And then with the locking lever, the intent here is to get it as tight as you possibly can, and the rule of thumb is you can't put a tourniquet on too soon. So if you're bleeding, even if it's superficial bleed, which could then turn severe, get a tourniquet on. And if the gunshot wound or the wound was, say for example, anywhere in the leg, we're thinking as best as possible an inch or two above that wound, so you want to get it a little bit higher. When in doubt, go higher, rather than trying to put it right on top of the wound. And then once you get the lashing wind, nice and tight, then this locking lever here, as you place that over top to lock it in place, this is just going to help you. Say, for example, your buddies are dragging you through the ground or through the dirt. This is just one less thing that's going to get fetched up on something that may become dislodged. And then a good idea is to write the time that it was applied. So when you do get to a level 2 trauma center, for example, then whoever's viewing that to then add more advanced medical care, they've got a good idea, right? That went on at 11 a.m. or whatever. So that's one way to apply a tourniquet.
Makes sense.
In the setup. So with the rig, so I have it set up. One I have on the front, as you can see. In some cases, I'm going to put another one in the back or another one on my belt, but I'll just go through the way I have this currently set up. So normally it would be gun belt and rig, but say for example, doing something, either just a range day, and we're not wearing the rig, but we are wearing the belt, then I might think about either put my tourniquet in one of my pockets, so at least I have that on me if I'm not wearing my rig, or with a medical kit on the belt, I might consider switching out one of the bandages that are in here with a tourniquet. So personal preference, personal choice. We'll talk about the belt in a second, but so when you flip the rig over, sometimes people ask me, well, why do you have a med pouch on your back that's not accessible? You're right, it's not accessible for me, but if you and I were partnered up, this is accessible for you. So this would be a little bit more of a robust kit that if I was in serious trouble, you could apply kit from my rig.
Yeah.
That way you're not depleting your own personal stuff. And essentially with it being on the back, I put it on the back because this is a space that's available. It doesn't really get in the way, I don't really notice it. But most importantly, I guess, in terms of the application, if you are assessing me, chances are this rig is gonna come off, right? Even if it's just temporarily. The rig is gonna get off, you're gonna expose those wounded areas and figure out what it is and then pass the guy out. So while the rig is off, you then open up this kit, see what's available there, and then understanding as you do your assessment what it is that you're trying to treat, then you have some tools that you can treat it. Right? So that's the reason for that. So in the event that you were fixing me up, the rig may be off temporarily. Once you get the guy passed out, then you would most likely put the rig back on to help protect him, getting him from point A to point B. Right? So in here, what I essentially have is kit and equipment for, I'm thinking massive bleeds, stop the massive bleeds, or airway, essentially. So what I have in here is a gauze, a wound dressing, that we can pack up a hole that is bleeding profusely, for example. And also got an H&H bandage here that is essentially, I think it's six yards, it's 4 yards. So 4 yards of compressed gauze that you could fill in, a gunshot wound or a hole or a gaping wound that needs attention. So you could really open that up and feed it in those crevices to allow the bandage to absorb as much blood and clot that hole as best as possible. And then in here also I have a nasopharyngeal airway. So this NPA is designed to help the individual breathe. So going into shock, maybe his level of consciousness is starting to drop, or he's having a hard time breathing. This beveled end of the NPA would go into the nostril, and as you feed it in, so the beveled end towards the septum, you would feed it in so you can see it pushes into the back of where the trachea would be. So it pushes into the back and opens up that airway. And then this little guy here is going to give you just a reference. So depending on the size of the person, it might be a little bit different, right? So you need a little bit more, a little bit less. This is going to adjust it. So when this is, if you can imagine, sticking out of the node, it may look something like that. It's going to be in the back of the neck, provide some airway. So that's important. So massive leads, and then airway, and then have a 14 gauge catheter. So this would be for attention pneumothorax. So in the event that, gunshot to one of the lungs, for example, or maybe some sort of trauma where it's like a blast wound where the lungs may be compromised, you may have a deviated trachea, which would represent that one of the lungs is not working the way it needs to. So the needle decompression, this 14 gauge essentially would be in the lung that is affected, and so you want it to be able to breathe properly, so you would essentially landmark where you need to, so along the nipple line, stick it into the lung that is affected, left or right side. I mean, and this would be a lesson on its own on where to landmark and then how to landmark, but essentially the use of it would be to release some of the tension that's in that lung, helping the individual with a little bit of those shock values that will take effect in the event that he's either got a gunshot wound to one of the lungs or some sort of massive blast. And so that's what I have in here. And then the last thing that I put in this particular kit, so this is just like a cheap but very efficient and effective thermal blanket. So in the event of hypothermia, keep the guy warm as best as possible. So you're gonna open this up. It's not tactically sound, but we're talking some serious situation here where we gotta get this guy to some sort of heightened level of medical care. We can warm him up with this, wrap him up, keep this body armor over top of everything to help keep his temperature up as best as possible. So that's it in a nutshell. And it's when you pack it in, yeah, the med kit is pretty full. Are there other things that you could put in here? Sure, but my thought process is massive bleeds for sure when I patch that up, or at least address that. Airway, so some sort of way to help the individual get that air into the body and the oxygen to the brain. And then the third one would be anything that is going to cause some sort of shock. So if there's a lung issue, the tension pneumothorax, or sorry, the tension pneumothorax will help with the relief of that. So there's three major causes for a lot of combat deaths. These tools will help prevent that.
Question.
Yes.
Number one, the landmarking for the actual catheter.
Yeah.
Sternum to nipple.
Yeah.
And then where's the actual placement?
So the placement would be